Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So whether you have a book in your head, a book in your heart still ready to be written, a manuscript ready to go, or even 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer, please visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by three authors who have unbelievably unleashed themselves. Claudia Blood is the author of Company Assassin. It's book one in the Relic trilogy. T. Norman is the author of Blood-Stained Heir from the Ascent Archives. And finally, Shereen Vedam is the author of Death Takes a Detour, book one in Outside the Circle mystery. But first we're going to meet Claudia, and the author writes of Company Assassin. It's Duff Roman's 18th birthday, but no one is lighting candles. Turning 18 in the orphanage on Kaleka means starvation for those who aren't hired into a family. Outside the family compounds lies the jungle, and in the jungle lies death. And relics, the only real currency on planet Kaleka. The orphans are Duff's family, and he's sacrificed everything to keep the orphanage running, even his chance to move on. Now at 18, he has no choice but to leave. Without him to bring in extra money, the orphans will starve under the company's control. Duff's only chance to save them is to find a spot on an independent crew and hopefully find a relic to send. A seemingly chance encounter with Z, leader of the most feared independent crew, offers Duff his opportunity to score a relic and offers Z a chance to relieve the guilt he feels over his past. But a company assassin has plans to lay waste to Duff's future and the orphanage as well. Please welcome author Claudia Blood. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. I'm a little scared now. Turning 18, I have a son who just turned 18, and I feel like saying, this is what happens in other places when you turn 18. You should enjoy yourself.
My husband says we have an 18 and out policy, so my kids are going to understand that very intimately.
Oh yeah, 18 and out. I'm telling you, I should hold that over their heads. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind the book and the series.
So it actually came from two dreams that I had, believe it or not. I had this dream about this crew inside of the jungle, and it was all like, jungle overridden, and they're hacking their way through it, and they come upon this some architecture that's there. And when they break inside, I find out that they're looking for relics, and inside it's all alien technology. And when they turn on the machine, they figure out how to, they get an 80s aerobics instructor that shows up in the middle of this jungle planet. And I had this, what? Like, what in the world is going on? So that was the inspiration for the crew. And then I also had another like sort of image of this very driven woman who, her daughter was lost and she had to try and figure out how to save her, and lost because of technology. And so these two ideas came together, and one was the good guy and one was the bad guy. And that's what formed the Relic trilogy.
Wow.
Was that combination. It's a weird combo.
And I do.
Yeah.
Tell me something, just for our wannabe authors out there. Was this like one dream and it was just so vivid and you remembered it, or did you keep having this? Were they haunting you over and over and over, these storylines or characters? How does that work?
For me, it's that one, if I get a lot of different dreams. And so if something actually sticks, or you're just like so curious about what in the world is going on, that you have to keep poking at it and keep poking at it. And then the more you think about it, the more other things come in and kind of, flow inside of it. So for me, it kept poking at me. So I'd forget for a little bit and then it would poke and I'd be like, oh yeah, what about, hey, that works over here. And then it would come together. Wow. So it's just a continual poking that happens when something is exciting enough.
I love that. And we have so many people in the world. I mean, they say that 90% of the country wants to write a book. I completely believe that's true, because if I
I
walk
believe
to a
that.
cocktail party and people are like, oh, she's a publisher, everyone swarms. I wrote a book. I want to write a book. I'm thinking about writing a
Yeah.
book. Like, everybody wants to write a book. So you're sitting here with me and it's like, okay, you didn't just write one. You wrote like a lot. You wrote like a lot of books. So tell me, is it melatonin? What are you doing before bed? How do we write?
I think you establish habits and you actually have to write. I spent a lot of years wanting to be a writer, but never actually doing the writing. And
Mm,
so I finally was like, I either need to write or say I'm a reader and just go and be a reader, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's an
no,
awesome
no,
thing
no,
to do.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that. And by the way, for all of our viewers who are readers, we love you, and please read our books and leave lots of reviews about them. That's like huge.
Yes.
We need readers. If there are no readers, there are no writers. So really, we
There are
need.
no writers.
But I love the way you said that. You had to kind of decide. Like, I have to do.
Yes.
I have to make habits. Do
Yep.
you write first thing in the morning? Do you have like a daily word count? Like, when you talk about habits, what do you do?
Yep. I would love to write it in the morning, but I can't. I wake up like right before the kids go to school and I have to start the day job. And so it's very chaotic and I'm just not, I just can't. So what I would do is when the kids go to bed, that's my time. So I like shut the door, pretend like I can't hear them, and do a couple hours worth of writing. And it really helps that I've got some friends that we do writing sprints, which traditionally that's, writing as fast as you can. But the way we define it is it's focus time. So you focus on whatever it is that you need to do to move your story forward. And I've got one friend who does puppet shows and she, mimes out the scenes and that's what gets her going on her writing. So we focus time, whatever it is we need to keep moving forward. And even if it's small incremental, it's forward motion and that's all that matters.
Oh, I'm so glad you talked about community and support, because I think that that's huge. And if there's any positives, we try to think about pandemic positives. A lot of
Mhm.
people seem to have found much more in the way of community, almost like people were looking in, well, my town doesn't have it. And now they kind of realized, well, the world is my
Doesn't
oyster.
need it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is your group like, do you know them in, I hate to say real life, or is this like a live, or is this a,
I've got a mix. I've got a mix of some local people that I met through NaNoWriMo, and then I've got others that I've met through different classes that I've taken in different online communities. And you just sometimes get with a person and you click. And so you keep that open line of communication. I've got one girlfriend in England that when our timelines align, that we do our sprinting together. So and I've never met her, but I love her to death. So,
oh,
it's both.
I love that. And I love the way you're talking, not just about the support that you're getting, but the friendships you're making. You know,
Mhm.
that is so huge, because writing um technically is a very lonely thing to do. You sit in a room, like you said, you shut the door, you pretend to ignore your children, the whole thing. It's a very lonely job. But the way you're doing it, it sounds like, oh, I get to meet people from around the world and they're all my friends, and it sounds great.
I really think too that there's something about writer brain that this is the only group of people that I can be like, yeah, so that 80s aerobic instructor in the middle of the jungle and this future doesn't plan. Like, what do you think if I did this with them? Do you think that would work? And everybody else looks at you like, wow. But writers are like, yeah, okay, let's talk about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. So tell me about the whole series. This is book one, and
Mhm.
what goes on? How many books? Are they all written? Are they all out?
Yep, it's a trilogy, so there are 3 books. They are all written and published, so it is completed. I'm actually working on a prequel series because I love the bad guy in this so hard that I needed to write her story. Ravine is like my favorite character as a bad guy, and she's not nice. I mean, in this book, she's not nice, these books. But so it is completed and ready for people to read end to end.
Oh, that's fabulous. So we can get started and we don't have to be like, hurry up, Claudia, write faster.
Which is the worst feeling.
Well, George R. R. Martin, like, there we go.
There we go.
There are some books we're just never going to get. So there we go. So it's good to know that the trilogy is done, but now a prequel. That's kind of cool. It was like you said, it was just poking at you.
It was the prequel is going to be called the series Renegades Rising, and the first book is going to be called Guardians of the Green, and it's set hundreds of years before this because Ravine is not a time traveler, but she skipped through time because of time dilation. So it's her story and how she got there.
Gotcha. Now, when you're writing, when you wrote the initial trilogy, did you know everything that was going to happen? Have it all plotted out, things like that? Okay.
Nope.
If you didn't,
Nope.
now here's my question about writing a prequel. You kind of know where it has to end, at least. I mean, at least you have to lead up to. Does
Yep.
it make it kind of hard for someone who doesn't really plan in advance?
It does and it doesn't. There's definitely some flexibility. So when I write, I use what's called the flashlight method. And so I'll get my beginning scene and then I'll kind of figure out what's going on and I'll write and figure out characters. And then I aim for what I think the end is and see how it goes. And then it goes like this and it goes like that. And it goes all over the place. What I like about that is it's surprising. Anything that I've tried to write an outline for, I've never been able to write because it's done. There's no surprises. It's like, all right, moving on. But yes, so you always have to keep some of those key things in there. And then you can also have the whole misunderstanding or the character lied that can come up that can correct some of the things that you might have gotten a little wrong. But
do you have trouble remembering? I mean, you're talking about a trilogy with now all these prequel books. You're talking about world building because you have a whole, what do you do for organization and jogging your memory? That's a lot of characters, a lot of worlds, a lot of how does physics work in this place, and a lot of things.
I would love to say I was organized and it would be a lie. It would be a flat out lie. I have people who I would love to like hire someone to organize it on a thing and then I would never look at it. So I actually sometimes reread, or I'll have this whole, wait a minute, I talked about that. And then I'll go searching for it inside of the book and see if I can figure out what was going on. So unfortunately, it's all in my brain, which is probably not the best place to be.
It's working.
It's working so far, knock on wood.
Now, was this your first foray into long form published, or have you, dabbled before? Tell me about your history.
I dabbled in some short stories, and then I wanted to write a book. I mean, what author doesn't want to write a book? Not that everybody does, but most people do. And so, but I struggled because actually writing a complete book is hard. And then writing a complete book with mystery, sci-fi, romance, and everything else inside of it is even harder to keep track of all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I finished was a mystery called At the Cabin that it was just, and I just let myself, it's just a mystery. There was no scientific, no fantasy elements, and got it done so that I could prove to myself that I could write a book. I'm not saying it was good, but it was done. And then I rewrote it as a fantasy. And I added in demons and added in all sorts of different magic and that kind of thing. And that was the first book that I published.
That is the first time I have ever heard someone say that in that order. And I love that. I want to make sure I understood this. So you wrote a mystery.
Yep.
And then turned it into a fantasy.
Yes.
I'm kind of loving that. Because, for someone who wants to write fantasy, that's a lot going on at once. You know what I mean?
Yep. The world building, the magic, the rules. Yeah.
Rank, one type of genre as more difficult, or like that's the, the advanced level courses of, that's the AP level. And this is like the freshman. I'm not trying to rank them, but I could certainly understand that. Like you said, the world building and all these other things. If someone wanted to kind of get their feet wet, maybe writing, you said it was a mystery first, I guess.
It was a mystery.
Set today, or,
Yep.
in this world, like we know it, in my
yep. Or suspense, something, or just to prove to yourself that you can do end to end, and then you can, tweak the things that are expected for that genre.
That's very cool. I love that method. I would not be surprised if that was like a big light bulb moment for someone, to kind of say, wow, I can get my feet wet,
Mm-hmm.
And yep. I'm really glad you said what you did about, I needed to prove to myself that I could write a book. I think that
because it's daunting. I mean, you think of how many words it is and how long it takes and everything else. And it's a very daunting task.
Yeah, I am a huge believer in success breeds success, because once we have the confidence that we can do something, then you can do it again and again and again. I always think about the first person to run, what was it, like the 6-minute mile? Like throughout all of history, nobody could run the 6-minute mile. And then one person did it, And within 6 months, like 50 people did it. I think my nephew did it when he was like 7. Like now that it's been broken, it's not
Right.
scary. And
That mental block is gone.
right.
Right.
And
Yep.
your description of how you wrote that first book, whether it was good or bad, is so immaterial. It gave you
Right.
confidence to say, yeah, I got this. I could do this. And now a trilogy and prequels and like all this other stuff going on doesn't look so scary.
I'm just going to also say, though, that it honestly still is, but at least you've got that. I did it once. Okay, I did it once. I can do it again. So when all those voices say, yeah, maybe not this time, you can hold on to that, but I did it once. Come on.
Well, I mean, every writer in the world has imposter syndrome. I mean, that's just
Yes.
reality. And
Yep.
every writer in the world wakes up some days and says, nobody's going to want to read this garbage. And everybody does.
Everybody. Yep.
It doesn't matter how many, 5-star ratings you have, how many, Amazon bestsellers, you still wake up some mornings thinking, does anybody really want to read this stuff?
Yeah.
And that's scary, but like you said, you did it once, so you knew.
Mm-hmm.
So we have here, I just want to remind our viewers, because we want them all, or readers, remember all that? Company Assassin is from the Relic trilogy. It is book 1. It is all out, so you can find it at Claudia's website, as well as wherever retail books are sold. And Claudia, when are we going to get the prequel books? When can we count on those?
I hope to have them later this year.
Fantastic. And certainly, if you would like to sign up at her website, I'm sure that you'll get notified about all that great stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
Please, when those are ready, let me know so that you can join us here and we could tell our viewers. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next author, T. Norman, is the author of Blood-Stained Heir. And the author writes, after the sudden death of his beloved wife, Rishtrell struggles to keep his life together and devotes everything to raising their son. When the king of Ansaroth seeks vengeance for the murder of his father, Rish is forced to defend his home and family again. As an army pursues him across Ansaroth, Rish fights to honor a promise he made to a dying friend. With little hope of survival, he searches deep inside to find the soldier he spent years burying away. Will Rish keep his promise, or will evil forces stop him from reaching his goal? Please welcome author T. Norman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so glad to have you. First of all, is it Rish or Reich, or what did I mull that?
You got it. All of it was right. Rishtrell, you got it.
Well,
yeah.
because I'm like one of those people who read, the Harry Potter books and called her Hermione for the longest time. I had no idea. So
yeah.
I'm glad
I'm
I
in the same
felt
boat.
that. I'm usually the one to mull the names. So wow, I'm a little terrified. What inspired your book and the whole series?
Yeah, it really started when I was young. My brother and I, we just had active imaginations. We'd play with toys and just create these stories together. And that was kind of my childhood, was always crafting these stories. I read books. I mean, all the Tolkien books. I was a huge Star Wars fan. So I was immersed in fantasy and fiction and sci-fi and all of that growing up. So I always just had these stories building in the back of my mind. And then in college, I stopped reading really for fun because it was always schoolwork. I hated it. And towards the end of college, I was finishing my schoolwork and I decided, I'm going to start reading again for fun. And I picked up some different epic fantasy books and started reading them. And this story that was kind of there for a long time started building and developing more. And eventually I just decided I need to try and write this. I got to try and put it down on paper and see what becomes of it.
Wow, I love that. And you're so right. So many of us loved to read as a child, and then life got in the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and school, and I'm a teacher at heart as well, but we do have a tendency to make people hate reading because of schoolwork, and all the other things.
It happens. Yep.
Which is really, really a shame. So the actual storyline behind the Blood-Stained Heir and the Ascent Archives, the actual storyline, did you have like a vivid dream like Claudia, or did you just like start to kind of gem it out? How did people always ask me,
Yeah,
how do I get an idea? So T, how did you get the idea?
definitely not a vivid dream. I rarely ever remember dreams. Maybe once a year I'll remember my dream. Otherwise, nope, nothing. It really was just kind of like I said, it was a story that we had worked on and developed. I had these characters
Yeah.
in my mind. I had a very base foundation. And when I started writing book one, I had an idea of where I wanted the series to go. I knew some big things that were going to happen, but the more I wrote, the more the story developed into something bigger. And
Mhm.
I just kind of was able to add characters and add storylines and add all this as I was writing. I was kind of discovering what was happening in the big picture as I was going.
Now, you and your brother used to be doing all these stories and fantasy when you were growing up. What
Mhm.
like now? Is he a novelist also?
No, he's not. Nope. He works in a school. So he works with kids. He was creative as well. He would draw his own comics and stuff as a kid. So he did some of that when we were younger. We were both huge Star Wars fans. So that was a lot of what he was drawing and creating storylines on. But I think he's a huge movie connoisseur and TV shows and books and all of that as well. So we're absorbing a lot of different forms of media.
So there's no joint book coming out between the two of you.
No, probably not. I don't think he has any passion to be a
No
writer.
aspirations. No aspirations. Of that
No,
going on. So tell me about your other books. How many books are in the Ancient Archive series?
so there are technically 6 books in the series. 4 of them are the main series. It's the main storyline starts in book 1, ends in book 4. Book 5 is actually a collection of short stories that are all predominantly set before the series starts. They follow different characters that you meet throughout and develop some backstories that were hinted at but never fully fleshed out during the main series. That was honestly the most fun to write because I got to go into a lot of different characters' heads that I didn't write in before. I got to develop some really cool history and backstories for all of them. And then the 6th book is actually a prequel. It's a novella that it describes the assassination that was in the book description. So there's a main assassination that kind of started this war between these 2 nations. And that tells the story about that and what actually happened, because the story we hear in the novels isn't real. It's a fabrication. They made up this story to meet an agenda. So we go back and we learn what actually happened.
Gotcha. Now, when you started this, did you think I'm just going to write one book? I'm going to write a book called The Bloodstained Heir, and then it just kind of kept going and going and going, or did you know? When does that happen?
I had a plan to do at least 3 books. Like I said, I kind of had an outline. I knew this is where I wanted the story to end. This is what I wanted to happen. Once I got about halfway through book,
in one book. That storyline.
no. Yeah, I knew it would be more than one. But halfway through book 1, I realized I would probably need 4 books to tell the full story, just because of everything I wanted to hit. And part of me was like, you know what? Everyone writes a trilogy. I'm gonna write 4 books instead because it's different. So I want to stand out a little bit.
I love that. I'm going to stand out. I'm not writing a trilogy. That's for
Yeah.
I'm going to write 4 books.
Gotta try something different, you know.
That's very funny. That's funny. But that's why we can now just call them the Ascent Archives, not the Ascent Trilogy or something.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
Tell me about your book cover development for this and for your other books. They're so striking. What are you thinking about when you're doing them? Is it symbolism you're thinking about? Is it genre you're thinking about? What is it that goes into that?
So I actually have I think a very unique process for designing all my covers. I actually base them all off of photos that I'm taking. So I went out in the woods. For a hobby, I throw tomahawks sometimes. So I have some tomahawks and axes. And I went out in the woods and staged a picture with an axe in a log with a bunch of trees in the background. And I sent that to my cover designer. I said, this is kind of the inspiration I want. Each cover has one weapon on it, kind of as the symbolism. There's a weapon in the front. They're all different. They're all this monotone color where there's this one's kind of more of an orangish yellow. Book 2 is more of like a bluish white. Book 3 is white and black. Book 4 is a green, and book 5 is purple. So they all kind of have a secondary color that is focused on there. So all of them, they're based off pictures that I've taken, and then I've sent those over, and I've told them a little bit of what I want to see, and then they're phenomenal. I love these covers that they made. I'm obsessed with them myself.
They are beautiful, but they started from a photograph. So you went out in the woods with an axe and took that photo?
Yep. Yeah. So book one, it was photo. Book two, it was a full moon. I got up really late at night and went out and got a full moon shot over an open field. Book three was at a hike in the middle of the winter in some woods. Book four was at a beach in Mexico. So all of them they're based off photos that I've taken, and I just use that as inspiration.
I love how intimately you're involved in the covers. And you know what? That rings through. I mean, I could see those covers and say, this was an intentional decision. I don't always feel that way, but yours definitely looked like an intentional decision that you wanted it to be organic with the book, which is amazing. So
I appreciate hearing that there.
No, that you succeeded. Absolutely, you succeeded.
Yes.
You said there was a prequel that's coming out. That's not out yet, the novella?
It is out, yep.
It is out.
So it is only on my newsletter though. So that's why it's technically there are 6 books. It's not published anywhere else. You have to get it by signing up to my newsletter.
So, yeah.
Eventually it will be on retailer sites.
Right,
It'll be available to all of them, but
for the moment, you have to sign up to get it. So
exactly, yep.
Where is your writing journey taking you next then?
So I actually just recently started a follow-up series. Takes place in the future. It follows some characters at the end of the story who go on a different adventure. I can't give too much details away. I haven't told any of my readers anything about it yet, but it's a follow-up to this. So that will probably be a trilogy that follows a group of characters. And then I also have plans for another series set in the future, same world, some similar characters, some new characters as well. So I've spent a lot of time developing the magic system, the world, their cultures and everything like that, that I want to stay in it for a while.
I get that.
Create all these in-depth storylines within that.
Now you're going to stay in your world and write other storylines. How do you, I'd asked Claudia about organizing your thoughts. You've got this whole world and you're going to keep the world. Do you just know it's so intimate, like you don't even have to take notes, or how does that work out?
Partially yes, partially no. I have a few different systems that I use. One is I have a bunch of Excel documents, one document for each book, essentially, that break down every chapter, what characters are included, the main points that happen, who interacts with who. It has character information on all the characters as well. So same with Claudia, when I'm writing, I forget, I know I talked about this. I can quick look back, see exactly what chapter they were in. I'll reread it and figure out exactly what was said. But normally the Excel will have the highlights. So if there's something I need, it's in there. Sometimes I reread it. But I also use an app called Aeon Timeline. It's on my computer. And I use that more with the book 5, whereas all the prequel kind of novellas or short stories, character timelines were overlapping and stories were overlapping. They weren't as neat as a trilogy or a series that's chronological. So I use that to remember, where was this character at this point in time? I can plot out all the points saying they're in this chapter at this point in time. So I can't write them in this other story at the same time. It doesn't work out. So I use those two as a combination. Excel is more of the information. Aeon Timeline helps me keep track of who's where and when.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Because now that you're going to be staying in this world, you know, I don't know if in any of these other new series, new books, if there's going to be any crossover, like they're going to bump into someone who was already in this book. As a
the new series are all progressing into the future, so there will be overlapping characters, but I'm not going back in time anymore. So I can kind of start fresh at the new book and then figure it out from there and then start fresh again.
Gotcha. Now, do you write every day? Do you try to write every day? Do you write just when the moon is full? How does this work?
I wish I wrote every day. I wish I had that kind of habit, but I don't. I have 2 young kids. I also work full-time as well. So my writing time comes in little sprints here and there. I drive a lot for work, so I do a lot of voice recordings. So I'll narrate or dictate a chapter as I'm driving, just kind of get it out there, and then I'll come home and transcribe it whenever I can. Right now, I think I have 6 or 7 hours of narration on my phone that I need to transcribe. So I'm a little behind.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm behind. I'll admit it.
Amazing though, 6 or 7 hours. I'd be a little afraid. I know when I do voice recording, and sometimes I look back at it afterwards and say, that is definitely not what I said. But they changed some of your words. I see Claudia laughing because, they'll add in all sorts of crazy. You're like, I don't know what they were thinking. So T. Norman's books might not actually be what he thinks they're about.
Yeah, I catch all that before I put it on the paper.
I'm sure you do.
I get it there.
Well, when the next stuff comes out, we want to hear all about it here. That is for sure. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Our next author, Shereen Vedam, is the author of Death Takes a Detour. And it's Outside the Circle Mystery, Book 1. And our author writes, Abby Grimshaw's road to recovery from a traumatic experience takes her on many journeys. On a whim, she stops at St. Michael's Church and runs straight into more danger. This time, there's a supernatural complication. She can see and talk to the Earl of Ashford. He died in 1816, but death doesn't stop him from charging Abby with the safety of 2 young orphans. She never imagined life would send her literal demons to battle, but Abby is a Grimm, like her mother before her. There's a long legacy of defending the innocent at stake. If she cannot master child minding and demon slaying simultaneously, her own legend will be short-lived. Please welcome USA Today bestselling author Shereen Vedam. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So much. Well, you know, if your protagonist here needs to learn about how to raise children, we have people with young children. We have authors here.
I can see that.
They're trying to schedule writing around their children. So they can take advice right here.
Very good. I'd love some advice.
Absolutely. And so would your heroine here. So tell me a little.
Heroine, absolutely.
So for you, was it a crazy dream? Was it knocking on your door with a storyline? Do you just have so many stories ready to go and this one was the run ready to take life? How does that work out?
I'm different in the fact that I try to pretend I plot. So I come up with a whole idea of what I want to do, and then once you start writing, it goes in an entirely different direction.
Oh.
But I always start off with an idea, and this time I want to learn how to write mysteries. I want to learn how to do good mysteries. I put them in other books that it's like I have a bad habit of telling you who did it first. Let's try and practice of this. And so I decided to do a whole series of 8 books of mysteries and try and learn how to do it really well. And so that was the inspiration for this series.
Oh my gosh, I love that. It's a learning project for you.
It's a learning project.
I think that's fabulous. Claudia mentioned that and I jumped on it, learning the craft while doing it. And that is so exciting. So and you're like right there with T. Like, I'm not doing a trilogy. I'm not even doing 4 books. I'm doing 8. 8 mysteries.
I wanted to do a long series anyway. I've written trilogies before, and I'm actually opposite to Claudia in the fact that I love fantasy, and it was the first thing I wrote out of the gate was fantasy. And then it took me a long time to write one of the series that I found it was one of my favorites, which is Regency historical romances. I love Regency, and I used to read them like crazy, but I was frightened that I could never do justice for them. And it took me a long time before I would actually do the Regencies. And then when I did, of course, there was fantasy in it, but I did a couple.
It should be.
Yeah, there were a couple of series like that. And then when I came to this series, I was thinking, well, now I've mastered fantasy and Regency. I want to figure out how to do mysteries really well.
Oh my gosh, you're like the opposite of Claudia here. Yeah. Let's do mysteries last. So now you're up to learning mysteries. You already got the fantasy.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. And Regency historical too. That's one of my faves. I love that. That's fabulous.
And when I started this, because it's contemporary series, it has fantasy, of course, because it's urban fantasy, but I wanted to bring a little bit of my experience with Regency. So there's a Regency ghost in this one.
Oh, of course.
Nice.
That's why we have the Regency ghost. I get it.
Yes.
I get it. So this is a mystery and you managed not to tell us who did it in chapter 1?
Yeah, I tried. I tried very hard.
I mean, or you could tell us, and then because you don't really follow your own outline, maybe you change your mind.
No, let's see. I'm hoping I didn't give it away too much, but it is taking practice. I'm actually working on the first draft of book 6 right now. So
I'm sure that that's a huge balance, and I'm so glad that you said that. Book 6, wow. The balance between telling people too much in a mystery and not enough, because you know, certainly you want your reader to, well, you'd like them to be led astray. That would be nice.
a little.
But at the end, when they find out who actually did it, you kind of, I would guess, want two reactions. One was like, no way. And then the second should be, yeah, I
I should have
see.
seen that coming. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Right.
coming.
And if they don't see it coming, then you didn't put enough in there. But you have to put that kind of stuff kind of hidden, because up until like, you know, 2 pages before the end, you want them thinking it's someone else or whatever. You know, that's a balance.
Exactly.
How do you work that balance in a mystery? Can you tell me a little bit about
It's, I think I'm learning how to do that, but it's pretty much trying to treat every. For me, it helps in the way in a bit, because I do plot it out and then I go off in a tangent, so I don't actually know who did it by the time I get to the end. Like, where's the plot? Oh, it's over there on left field, and it's not that person.
telling people who did it right away to, I don't even know who did it.
Now that I know how I write, I can actually go out and say, oh yeah, this person did it, and then you find out at the end, no, they didn't.
Well, you know, I read once about they were talking about the difference between, you know, people who plot everything and outline, and people who go with the flow. And of course, the pantsers among them, the discovery writers, we'll call it, liked the excitement. And Claudia, you mentioned this, that if you knew how it was going to end, you were too bored to write it. You know,
Yeah, I have outlines for 6 books that will never happen.
yeah,
They're
because
just never going to
it's
happen.
like you already read the book. You know, like
Mhm.
now, somebody said, why would I do that? It's now I'm just taking dictation. That's not even fun. Shereen, you don't even know what's going to happen. This is like a movie you haven't even seen yet.
Well, I do have the plot, I know where I'm supposed to head, and I'm usually not nowhere near it, and then I will stop about halfway through, and I said, oh yeah, that's where I'm supposed to be, and find my way back, replot, and then veer off again, and then come back.
Hey,
So it's like, always, you know, the one side is always pulling the other side back.
it's working.
I get a little bit of both, the best of both worlds. I get to think it through and then go adventuring.
Oh my gosh. But you know, for all those people who with their book or their writing experience feel like they're lost in the wilderness somewhere, and oh my gosh, I think the plot is well over there. There's still time, don't worry.
You can go back there, yes. Just find the path back there.
You reread your stuff. How do you do that? You know, Hemingway once said that he leaves his typewriter every day, and he doesn't get to the end of a chapter or even the end of a sentence. He leaves it right in the middle, left, obviously past, in the middle of a sentence, so that the next day he knew what he was up to. How do you find your path? Do you have to reread your book again?
Well, actually, I try to, when I'm writing, I will actually, when I get back to it, I will go back and read the last at least 4 or 5 pages and then carry on. So I'm always editing as I'm doing those 4 or 5 pages, sort of polishing it up. So that by the time I get to the end, it's in pretty good shape, but it still needs editing as a whole.
Right.
And then it goes through the critique group and then they tear it apart. So then
As they
there's
do.
that. But at least it's in fairly good shape as far as the story is concerned by the time I get to the end. And I do reread the last bits before I carry on.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned the critique group tearing it apart, and you mentioned it with a laugh and a smile. Like, you know, you've got the thick skin, and that's what they're there for.
You need a thick skin, yes. Because as much as I think a writer, and same thing with readers as well, you always approach any kind of book with your own worldview, and you can sometimes impose it on that story and not and see things in there that the author probably never even intended to put in there because you're always trying to fit it into how you think the world works. And when you have a critique group, you have at least 2 or 3 other people who give a different perspective. I don't understand why they would do that. They might do this, right? And then it opens your mind up enough to be able to craft a more complex story.
Right. No, it's so important, but you do have to, well, I mean, writers, you have to have a thick skin with a lot of things. If it's not your critique group, it's your Amazon reviewers.
Reviews, editors, yeah.
And your editors and everything else, it's all, there's somebody out there. My gosh.
It all helps. It all helps.
Yeah,
it does.
So
absolutely.
So you've done fantasy, you've done Regency, you've done now mystery. What's next? Erotica? I mean, what do you want to learn how to do next?
I actually know what I'm going to do after this series is finished, and it's 8 books, so it's going to be a while.
Oh my gosh!
By the time all of them are out, but I want to do an epic fantasy mysteries. Why not?
Are the epic fantasy mysteries set in the 17th century? Is that what we're talking?
Yeah, it'll be in an epic fantasy world. And I actually wrote a short story like that a long time ago. Never did anything with it. So I want to take that and then do a whole, not necessarily a set number of books, but just continually with that one character and just solving mysteries in a university in this medieval world.
Wow. I love it. Boy, you're going to be busy. How long do these books take?
Well, before I retired, it used to take a long time, at least a year or 8 months to write a book. But now that I'm retired, I'm trying to get it around 4 to 5 months.
We're all jealous, just for the record.
These are short. These are short books. They're only about 50,000 words, the ones I'm writing right now.
The authors with children on the call here today they have children and jobs. They're all like so envious at your timeline.
Very.
Life still gets in the way.
Yeah, everyone wants to just retire now and write, everyone's don't you hear that? Wow, 4 months.
When I used to work full-time, and I worked full-time for decades, but I always thought I would be so bored when I retired, and it's so busy. It is always so busy. You will not be bored.
Well, good for you. There are plenty of people who are bored because they are not turning out book series every, oh my gosh. So that's like 3 books a year you're turning out at least?
I'm trying to, well, I wrote ahead. Before I actually published the first one, I had written at least 3 or 4. And so then, and trying to get them polished and edited and proofed. Right. And so, but once I did that, I'm working on book 6 right now, but book 1, 2, and 3 will come this year. So I wrote ahead enough that they can come out every 4 months without me worrying that, I'm not going to get it done.
Yeah, no, I get
I'm well far ahead of it enough that I'm actually working on the 6th book, which we should come out next October, not this October, but the October 2023.
Right, because there's all these other things already ready to go. Yeah, no,
so it's good to write ahead before you start publishing. So you're not feeling,
especially if they're connected, right? So that way, if something goofs over here, you're like, "Ooh, I need to change this."
This one exactly has an overarching arc right to the very end. And I did 8. I decided on 8 because there are 7 characters who are friends who are solving the mystery together. And so I wanted for each one to have a book of their own that, even though it's from one character's point of view, it'll be about each one of those 7 characters. And then the last one will be all 7 of them.
What a cool idea. That sounds fabulous. And what a wise thing for you to say about writing ahead, especially if you're doing a series, because if you write book 1 of a series, and then it takes you like 2-3 years to get to book 2. It's really hard to sell book 1. to focus on, money and sales. But quite frankly, people love series books. The three of you certainly know that people love to read series books, but they don't love to read series books that end with book one because the author didn't finish book two or book three.
Yeah.
So finishing them in advance or you release, it also takes a lot of pressure off of you as the writer to be able to just kind of relax into the later books.
Yes, and just enjoy the writing.
Very
It's hard. It was very hard for that first 2 years of writing and not publishing much, because I have a newsletter with quite a few people in it, and I was thinking, what am I going to tell them for 2 years?
And
Well, I keep writing, and the second year, especially before the first book came out, I was thinking, and then I thought, well, I will introduce each character in each newsletter, because it was a monthly newsletter, and I invented a fake newsletter news person who would interview the character.
Nice.
And so each one had an interview with each of the characters, which was kind of interesting.
What a great
Because you had to try not to say too much.
I am asked constantly by other writers, what do I put in a newsletter? And usually those people are asking me the question, the book has already been released. You're talking about even more difficult, how to keep your newsletter interesting when you haven't even released the books yet. And that's a great.
No. It was, and I made it a contest for them. I said, well, this is the next character that's coming out. He's this kind of paranormal person. Give a question to what that you'd like the Godfrey to ask that character, and then if I get picked out, you get a prize for it.
Oh, fantastic! I love that.
Great idea.
It is very difficult to come up with newsletter topics, that's for sure. And I hear that all the time from people. So the little interviews, the contests, all your characters. Well, all three of you are fantasy, so you have so much in your world to talk about, from the perspective of your world, which is so cool. And all three of you are so incredibly prolific. I'd love to ask you about each of your books. If you could describe, if I were going to go shopping right now, and I have a huge list of people on my shopping list, describe who I should be buying your book for. I'm going to start with you, Claudia. Who should I buy a copy of your book for on my list? Can you describe them for me?
So someone who likes a little bit of science with a little bit of fantasy, someone who likes a little bit of mystery, and there is a romantic element, but it is not the primary on it. So that's who I would describe.
Very cool. That's definitely people on my list. That's for sure. T, how about you? Can you tell me who I should be buying a copy of Bloodstained Heir for?
Yeah, well, my sister actually asked me this. She has some young kids as well. And I said it's rated PG-13 is what I would give it. So if you're comfortable with someone watching PG-13, they can read these books. But it's for fans of traditional epic fantasies, large casts of characters. If they like deep, convoluted storylines, then they'll probably enjoy this.
All right. I think that's fabulous. And Shereen, tell us about Death Takes a Detour. Who should I be buying a copy of this for today?
Well, these are urban fantasy mysteries, and they're a little different than the normal urban fantasies in the fact that it's quite clean. There's no swearing, there's no sex. And so pretty much anyone at any age could read this and have a lot of fun. And I think the one thing the reader would need in order to do this is someone who loves to have fun, because there's a lot of fun in this book.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. And thank you for saying what it doesn't have, because, I'm always telling people to know how to describe and differentiate. It really does help when people are saying, oh, great, I want clean. Book descriptions don't always say that, or the opposite. I really don't want clean. Whatever it might be. So you all have a busy time coming up with your new books, but I just want to ask you a crazy question. If you had to write a book, or wanted to perhaps, complete different, totally, no fantasy, no nothing, what genre are you going to write in? We're going to start with T. Tell me, is there something totally out of the ballpark that you'd consider?
Does sci-fi count as something different?
I mean, I don't know. I guess it would count if it happened like here and it was NASA.
Yeah, I have had thoughts of a sci-fi series that's based off of Earth, set in the future, way in the future, which mine has no scientific elements or anything like that right now. It's not on Earth or it's a made-up world. So
Right.
I feel like that's very different for me.
It's
I have to
different for
base a lot of
you.
it in the real world
if
with
it-
some sci-fi. So
If it's different for you, it's different. That's cool. Shireen, how about
perfect. I'll go with that.
you've written a number of different genres. Is there one that you don't have plans for, but you're like, maybe a children's book? I don't know. What is it? What's that?
It's funny because when I was at university, my professor used to tell me that he thought I was having a hard time deciding what to write because every week we had to submit a short story and every week would be a different genre. And he goes, "You're just exploring, aren't you, Shereen? You're trying to figure out what you write." And I said, and I'm thinking now, no, I'm still exploring. I haven't decided yet.
You haven't
I can write anything. I've written so many different kinds now. I could do it children.
You think it's children's or pure
I've written a
romance?
Western. I've done anything you probably pick. I've probably written a short story on.
Oh my gosh, she's done it all.
Love it.
Done it all.
Not be published, but I wrote it.
Well, we'll have to wait until this 8-book series is done and see where she goes next. That's for sure. Claudia, how about you? Is there some genre that you said you have 6 outlines. Are they things that, totally different genre or same?
So everything mine is also clean. So there's no sex, there's very little swearing. For whatever reason, it just wasn't in this book. And every now and again, I don't really want to write it, but every now and again, I have like an erotica sci-fi that pops in my head. And I'm like, it is really different from what I write. And I think it'd be very uncomfortable for me to write, but that would be the thing.
That
if
would be
it was
the
totally
opposite.
different.
That would be the opposite.
That would be the opposite. Yep.
And by the way, that's a high-selling genre too. So
I know, but it's kind of hard to write.
I agree. I have authors I work with who, they do fiction, romance, and when they do try to have like that, that sexy scene, even just one, it's like, this is really not easy.
Really hard. And not in the good way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no. And thank you for mentioning, the clean factor, and I hate to use the word clean factor as opposed to the dirty factor. I don't that definitely is a differentiator though for readers. So it is, there's no better or worse.
No,
Whether
just different.
It's just different, and
Different.
especially when people are selecting books as gifts, that is definitely a differentiator when they are selecting books for young adults or whatnot. It's definitely a differentiator, or even for themselves. So I think it's a good thing to mention, when you're mentioning your books, just because people either want to clean or they don't, and it's something to know. So if you put a toe into that extra genre, I'd be curious. Shereen keeps trying. She's like, I'm gonna learn. She's gonna be the one to come with this, like, complete erotica. It's robots and cats. And
well, the one that I have is a spaceship is actually fueled by sexual interaction. And so there's a whole cast of characters that are like, that's the thing that I have in my head over here. And I'm like, okay then.
You're talking amongst writers right now, so we're all cool with that.
Exactly. It's okay. But then actually writing it, I'm like, ooh, what should happen now?
We're all cool with that. Well, when these books come out, and the books that you plan on, not just the ones you don't plan on, please come back and join us here between the covers. And please also on social media, share your joys and your successes so that we can share them with our audience. And I hope all of our viewers got to meet our authors today. I loved meeting them. Go out and grab a book, and thank you for joining us between the covers. Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit betweenthecoverstv.com. By the way, at betweenthecoverstv.com, You can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.